Disclaimer for our podcast listeners. This podcast discusses sensitive topics related to drug use and suicide. If you are experiencing suicidal thoughts, please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988.
One fateful day, the executive director, Clinton, he was on air live. There was a student who messaged in and said, "I'm dying." Clinton realizes live on air, oh man, this is a real thing. And he called the cops and they found him dying on the living room floor and they saved his life.
Oh my God.
Clinton goes, maybe we just did on accident what we're supposed to do on purpose.
Welcome to Season 2 of the NEI Pioneer Podcast. We already have a fantastic lineup of guests this year that we are so excited to share with you. Starting off today, we have Brandon Butz, who is the leader of strategic partnerships at RemedyLIVE. RemedyLIVE is an organization based here in Fort Wayne that is dedicated to addressing the importance of mental health. RemedyLIVE remains at the forefront of innovation for mental health support as they've embraced new technologies. They offer live in-person events for schools and corporate events, as well as a 24/7 live chat center. We recently got connected with this organization and we knew that we wanted to share their story and their impact here on the podcast. So with that, let's jump into this conversation.
And welcome back to the NEI Pioneer Podcast. I'm Jonathan Sackett hosting today, and today I'm co-hosted with
Brice, Vance, copywriter here at NEI.
great individual. And guess who we've got for a guest today? The one and only Brandon Butz. Okay, so do we have this right for your title?
Yes.
Leader of Strategic Partnerships at RemedyLIVE.
That is 100% correct. Yeah, and I made that title up myself, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, because when you were nice enough,
Yeah.
kind enough to give us the tour,
It was cool.
can you give our viewers and listeners just a little bit of an understanding of what RemedyLIVE is and does?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had to work on this over the last 6 months that I've been there because we do so much and so many different things. When people ask me, okay, what does a leader of strategic partnerships do at RemedyLIVE? I have to figure out my elevator speech. So the quickest, if I only have a few seconds, I basically say that RemedyLIVE is in the suicide prevention business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a huge superhero nerd, and so I'm always big into the origin story of a superhero. Where RemedyLIVE started, it's a Fort Wayne-based company, but it actually started as Remedy FM. So Remedy FM was an online radio station founded in 2007, and we were just interested in reaching out to the youth. And so there was a lady named Sharp Binkley, a big radio magnate, and she said, I want to use my expertise in radio to figure out how to reach young people and create an alternative radio station to help them. And she hired a bunch of people that were not radio-based people. They were just almost like social workers more than anything else. And so they said, okay. She plucked a youth pastor from this church. He's our current executive director, Clinton Foppel. And he said, how can we maximize reaching out to people? And back in the ancient days of early Facebook and AOL Instant Messenger, if you remember those, they hooked those things up.
You remember when you'd get the CD in the mail?
Oh, yes.
Wow,
Or
yes.
that like noise when you connect. I remember my grandma had AOL and an ear.
Yep.
And so they did that, and they said, how can we do this to impact people? It was funny. It kind of accidentally fell backwards into technology somewhat with online because basically they looked at the price of a terrestrial radio station and an online radio station. They said, online's cheaper.
Yeah, by a long shot.
And you would know this based on your background. So it was really cool. And one fateful day, the executive director, Clinton, he was on air live with his co-host, and they were doing an after-school special program, just how you doing, whatever. And they would have these kids message in over the AOL Instant Messenger, Facebook, and they got a bunch of pranks and, hey, pick your nose, because they had webcams in there, and so they were trying to prank them.
They were high-tech for the early days of that.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, as I'll talk about, that's kind of still part of our DNA is the high-tech part.
Yeah.
But there was a student who messaged in and said, I'm dying. And so Clinton goes, ha, very funny, human condition, right? We're all dying. And the kid started saying some really concerning things like, hey, no.
Was this live on air?
Live on air.
Wow.
Yeah, way back then. And very quickly, Clinton was like, oh, this is real. Because the kid says, I have taken a bunch of pills. I will be dead by tonight. And so in the 11th hour, this kid felt comfortable sharing this. And Clinton realizes live on air, oh, man, this is a real thing. And so how are we supposed to find a kid with an AOL Instant Messenger name? That's all we have.
Yeah.
And the executive
luck with
assistant,
that, yeah.
exactly, she was brilliant, and she cross-referenced our database. And the reason he felt so comfortable messaging us was because he'd been messaging us and been a regular listener. And so much so that he won a sweepstakes from us several weeks earlier. And speaking of CDs, we sent him a CD in the mail. And so we had his address.
Oh.
So we call the cops, and Clinton's trying to figure out, how to explain what they are. Because the cop, how do you know this kid? How do you just go to his house with this address? Go now.
Right.
And they found him dying on the living room floor, and they saved his life.
Oh my God.
So as the mom is weeping in Clinton's arms a couple weeks later, thank you for saving my baby boy, Clinton goes, maybe we just did on accident what we're supposed to do on purpose.
Wow.
And so they stopped the Remedy FM, and they said, forget AOL and all that stuff. We'll build our own text-to-chat software to be a 24/7 help center for anybody who, like this young man, needs help now. And so that's kind of the backbone of our company is that chat center. We call them soul medics who chat with people. So.
Okay, and then so I'm gonna get a better understanding of all this.
Yeah, please ask any questions.
Because you had a background in counseling as well, didn't you?
Kind of. I've got a mental health background just because it's been a part of my story forever. My professional roles before this really prepared me pretty well for this. I had an undergraduate degree in marketing management, and so I was in the business side of things, sales, project management, things like that. And then God kind of took me another direction. I ended up going into ministry for about 5 years. I was a youth pastor before this. But one of the things that I saw a lot of times is that part of when I was trying to preach the word or reach these students, I realized I had a whole bunch of stuff in my life just with anxiety and different past things where that message came up a lot. And so I was pretty much constantly talking about my own mental health journey. In fact, I see a therapist. And actually, we had brought in RemedyLIVE a few years ago when I was a youth pastor to come speak to our students and our parents. And so I was aware of them.
No way.
And that kind of led me to where I am today.
Wow. So, just out of curiosity, how did it go from you bringing in RemedyLIVE to your youth to getting to actually becoming part of them? Did you approach them, or did they approach you?
Yeah, I approached them through somebody. So this is really cool. So it was about a year ago now. Let's go back several years. So when they came and they spoke, when I was doing my youth pastor thing, I had these adult volunteers that were part of my group and helping the students. And one of them really kind of discovered his own mental health journey. He found out that, a really cool guy, he found out that his grandpa was actually institutionalized like in the 30s and the 40s, and he dug up his original writings. The guy wrote a book. So mental health was very much on this guy's mind. And he went up to Clinton directly after the event because he was there, because he was part of my team. And he said, Clinton, I want to be a part of RemedyLIVE and what you're doing. And so I always knew that he was connected to him. And several years later, I was thinking about, okay, what do I want to do next in my career? And was talking with my church and trying to figure out, I want to do something different other than youth pastoring. But there really wasn't any other options at the church I was at currently. So I was thinking, do I go to a different church or whatever? And I was talking to my friend Tim, who's been a mentor, and he smiled one time and he said, I wonder what you and Clinton could get up to. And I didn't think about it for a couple months, and I just randomly at one point said, I better reach out to Tim and Clinton again. And within a few minutes, he had sent over the text, and we got together and met, and Clinton and I met about a year ago, and talked about what we could get up to together. So
Excellent.
Yeah, you mentioned that Clinton comes to an event that you're working at.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just you mentioned the text line. It's not just that. There's a whole bunch of other things that you guys do. What else is a part of RemedyLIVE that you guys do?
It's a really good question, and a good segue into basically what Clinton and I talked about a year ago. So now that I've kind of explained our text-to-chat center, which we call Soul Medic Central, the phone number for that is 494949. So you text that number, and within a few minutes, you're talking to a crisis specialist. So that is people coming to us.
Yep.
And that really got into full swing probably about 2013 or 2014. So a few years later, Clinton, and I was actually talking a little bit about this with Callie because I nominated him for the Pioneer Awards.
We saw it.
And if there's anybody deserving of the Pioneer Award, it's him, especially when I was looking at the description. And so, but he's a really charismatic guy, and so he knows everybody. So he's kind of Mr. Fort Wayne talking to all these people. And at one point in 2016, he was talking to some big movers and shakers, and they said, "That's great that people are coming to you, but remember your heart for like high schoolers and stuff. What if you go to them?"
Right.
Yeah.
And so in 2016, he developed the Get Schooled Tour, which is our first event.
Saw the videos.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Thanks to Callie, of course. But
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, I figured. The Get Schooled Tour is pretty incredible, again, because you know how you're talking about, high tech and stuff. That has just always been part of Clinton's DNA for Remedy Live as co-founder, because he said, okay, so this is what you're telling me. You want me to go in and talk to high schoolers about mental health, an adult, like good luck. And he said, but they will talk to something. And you know what that is? They'll talk to this smartphone in their pocket. So he said, what if we could figure out a way to leverage that? And he actually, with another company, developed his own proprietary software that's live anonymous polling in order to get at this mental health conversation and to start it. So, you know, there's a lot of organizations that'll go in and do after school specials and do education about mental health and whatever. He'll do that, and he did that, and he'll start with that. And then he'll go, by the way, log into our app using the QR code and whatever, and we're going to be pushing out questions to you. You know, have you been anxious in the last 30 days? Sometimes the extreme one, or every time the extreme one of, have you had serious thoughts of suicide? What's been giving you anxiety? And then he'll say, would you like to see basically what the room is saying? And even though it's still anonymous, he'll put up on the screen all this data, and it'll say 60% of the room is wrestling with this or whatever. And all of a sudden, the students start realizing, wait a second, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one wrestling with this. So that's our Get Schooled Tour event.
Do you guys report those findings to any agencies or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I would have to ask Clinton specifically on that one. I can tell you a couple things. I can tell you that we've never thrown away a piece of data in forever. So we're just sitting on mountains of this data. And you can actually go onto our website and look at how many students we've polled and that sort of thing.
The NEI Pioneer Podcast seems like the perfect place to plug our Pioneer Awards event. If you don't know, each year we host an awards event to celebrate our region's pioneers. Just like our podcast, this event aims to showcase and share the authentic stories of the people in this region. Now, this is a community-involved event. We had open nominations in the fall, and now we have our category finalists. This spring, we will have community voting, which is where you can get involved to vote on our category winners. Then we'll be followed by the event where we will announce the 2025 Pioneer of the Year. If you're in the Northeast Indiana region, we'll encourage you to go to pioneerstartshere.com to learn more about this event and how you can get involved. Again, that's pioneerstartshere.com. Now, let's get back into the podcast.
For you, did your experience, working with middle school and high schoolers as a youth pastor, does that help you? Does that help inform some decisions that you make, or are you able to lend a hand to maybe if Clinton or somebody in the organization has a question about how maybe you should handle something? Does your experience, working as a youth pastor help out in those instances?
Oh, absolutely. In so many ways.
Yep.
I would say, honestly, probably the first one is I got really inspired by the youth and their willingness to destigmatize this really stigmatized topic. So one of the things that was really neat, I just felt like God putting it on my heart, hey, one of the ways in which you can connect with these students is by sharing your story and sharing the panic attacks that you have, the fact that you see a therapist and things like that. And the fact that when I would get up there and share with them, and then we'd break into small groups or we'd have conversations afterwards, they were just so willing to talk about it, and which is not the case always across the generations. And so for me, I think that was a big one. Almost given me courage to continue to share my story. That was a big one. And then one of the things we talked about in the conversation a year ago, not that I would go into the Get Schooled tour, but just knowing that's there, and the guys over there, Graham and Anthony, are amazing. So even talking to them and working with them, and if they ever wanted to pick my brain about anything related to the youth, I'd be happy to do that. But yeah, it was hugely helpful.
Well, yeah, because I'm wondering, and again, I don't know if you guys have even gotten down this far yet. I'm wondering if you guys could take this data and be policy influencers.
Oh, man.
So, because what happens is, and again, I'm making this up. I have no idea.
This is great.
But if we, I'm a marketing guy, man.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I love it.
And I don't get out much. They don't let me out much.
Exactly.
You can tell because I'm almost always wearing the same outfit.
You have 10 different ones though. They look the same.
It's like Einstein.
Yeah,
it's like Einstein,
exactly.
but it's a black
or
leather
Steve
jacket.
Jobs. It's
It's usually a black leather jacket or something that says NASA on it. If we could either prove or disprove that maybe the greater Fort Wayne area needs more help or is healthier, doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Then it becomes the poster child for some of these other regions of the country. Hey, we have a mental health score of whatever it is. I don't know how they quantify those things.
Yep.
But wouldn't it be nice to quantify that and say, look, this is working.
Oh, yeah.
We're infiltrating the schools. We're getting real-time biofeedback, basically. And we can apply this because here's what it's starting to tell us: that there's certain equations of time of year, time of day, stress level, weather, whatever. If we could crack that nut and consult to the federal government say, look, this is and what I'm saying is we could help you with that. I would love that.
Oh man,
because if we took that as a prototype,
Clint would lose his mind.
Yeah. And that's not what I'm after, though. I want him to keep his mind because he sounds like a really good guy. But I just think
in a good way.
There might be something there that we could take this and show how it's illustrating itself to work. I don't know if that's part of the vision or if that's just me spitballing.
No, well, so let me spitball back because a couple things to speak to. First one. It's funny you mentioned that. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but it hits at it a little bit. So the Get Schooled Tour has been around since 2016. It's hit on enough schools that at one point we developed a partnership with Penn State. So Penn State is...
Get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. So what they did, and they're talking about kind of the next level of what you're talking about is, okay, that's great. You're in the schools. Now let's actually technically quantify it that... We're going to say that your program is an evidence-based program. And I haven't even gotten to talk about the corporate wellness program. So I'll just say this very briefly so that we can lead into it. So where I specifically lead over, it's called the Wired Experience. Very simple. In the Get Schooled Tour, you have an audience who is being anonymously polled, and we're educating and engaging with them on the mental health conversation. In 2019, people said, why aren't you doing this in the corporate wellness space? So that's me. And ever since I got on and heard about this Penn State thing, I said, oh, man, now we need to do it in the corporate wellness space and start building that.
Yeah, graduation.
At graduation. And then I'd have to talk to Clinton, or you'd have to talk to him a little bit. Again, with his mover and shaker and his networking, he's had a couple people, even recently, talking about, even at the federal government level, connections to mental health and that sort of thing. And I think what's so exciting about the future of RemedyLIVE specifically is, we've been sitting on these incredible, awesome, influential ideas and programs and events. And I think now the question becomes the exact question that you're asking, Jonathan, is what does that look like if we scale it?
Yeah.
Because if that happens, then sky's the limit.
Well, because what you're talking about now isn't just a hot topic.
Correct.
And it shouldn't be treated as flavor of the month either. We're dealing with the housing crisis right now and things like that. But if there's a crisis, if there's a mental crisis or a crisis of lack of confidence, then everything is blown. Everything is blown. I don't care if you've got the best widget out there. If you don't have that mental fortitude to fix the problem in front of you, you're useless.
Correct.
You're going to have more problems down the road. And I love what you guys are doing to get it at the school level and graduate it as well. Because I'll tell you something, it's, you were talking about, was it your grandfather in the 30s?
That was Tim Brown's grandfather.
Tim Brown's.
Yeah, so the guy that approached
because I'll tell you,
Clinton.
mental wellness has come a long way from the 30s.
Yep.
And I saw there was a documentary on HBO about that where they went into some of those. They were filming this in like the 40s and 50s.
Holy cow!
And it was scary.
Okay.
It was scary.
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
Unfortunately, it was avoidance. It was a place to lock away, not a place to understand and to flourish and blah blah blah.
Yeah. How is mental health talked about here locally? I mean, obviously on a national level, it feels like, oh, this is a mental health crisis. Is that how you guys are seeing, maybe trends or the way that how much you're interacting with people? Is it talked about the same way that it is nationally?
Yeah, it's a great question going off of what Jonathan was saying, because if we're thinking about the original part of this 70, 80 years ago, it was, let's just lock them away so we don't see them. And then now at a national level, now it's, okay, this is a major issue and a major problem. I would say locally in Indiana and Fort Wayne, I think there is a lot of, this is a problem. We're understanding and realizing that it's a problem. We want to do something about it, but we don't know how.
Okay.
And one of the things I think is really interesting, and this becomes pretty evident. I'm sure that the Get Schooled Tour boys would say the same thing, but for me in the corporate wellness space, I've seen it firsthand. There's a big calculation, I think, that goes on in people's heads where it's like, is this really going to help people, or how bad is the problem? So if I'm trying to go into an organization and say, hey, you need an hour-long wired experience to be able to help your people with mental health, it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. But is that really going to impact? And what I've watched happen is that people feel so comfortable on our polling that there'll be people that say, yes, I have thought about suicide in the last 30 days. And then the tenor of the conversation with the companies afterwards is, oh man, okay, this is worse than we thought. We need to help. And so then we continue that conversation. So I think that's part of the advantage of what we do, is it kind of brings the acuteness of the problem immediately, because how do you ignore somebody who just they were the one that just put it on there?
Well, yeah, and have you guys noticed anything in the whether it's a difference of temperament, whether it's a difference of willingness to respond between, because the corporate wellness program is called the Wired Experience.
Yeah, that's right.
The schools is the Get Schooled Tour.
That's right.
Now,
is college somewhere in there, or is that a part of the Get Schooled?
Yeah, it's funny. We it would be under the Wired Experience, but they at one point they called it like Wired U.
Okay.
But it would almost be in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Yes.
Because I'm wondering if what you guys are coming across as far as adults versus whatever the school age is. If is there more deception the older people get? Have you noticed things like that, or less of a willingness to talk on either end of the scale?
Yeah, I think that like I said with another question, I think the Get Schooled Tour boys would be able to answer that specifically for them. Speaking from my experience in the youth and then speaking to the corporate wellness, what I'm shocked about is I think by the time they get older, I think it's less of a willingness to share it out loud. And so that's where the magic of our software is when they truly feel comfortable, which they do. I was just working with a company today. We're going to do a follow-up with them because we did an event for them 5 or 6 months ago, and I was looking over their data, and some of the candor with which people are answering the major problems that they got in their life, they would never share that out loud to a person, especially at work. And so what our hope is going in is what we always say, starting the conversation, because even in our brains, there's this weird thing that happens when we say something out loud. We start rewiring our brains because our ears hear it and it goes. We've seen the same thing for when our thumbs start working on a phone screen in front of us, when this thought that's just whatever, the secret struggle, anxiety, whatever's been burdening that person, if it gets out of their head and they see it on the screen in front of them, maybe that was the baby step that's like, maybe I could find some other person to share this with and go on in that.
I wonder if it's weird because Carl Jung would know better than I would. But,
nice.
But I'm just wondering. I dug deep for that one.
Yeah, you did.
I'm just wondering if if that becomes their way to admit to themselves, or if there's an element of shame in admitting it to yourself.
Yeah, 100% shame. Shame is a big part. I think that's part of what limits it so much.
All right, you said it's mostly like older people that are willing to, go to the text line.
Yeah.
How do people of all ages most typically find you guys? I mean, because obviously you're going out into schools, but and what's the age range? Is it skew younger to older? I mean, along those same lines. How do people find most of the time RemedyLIVE?
That's a great question. So I would say kind of how it is now and how I'd love for it to be. So how it is now, it's been a lot of word of mouth. And so not a lot of traditional marketing going into it, although pretty cool. We have just secured a really neat partnership with Comets Hockey.
Yes.
And so there's actually a RemedyLIVE logo on the ice. And then our company is dropping the puck at several mental health awareness nights. So kind of stuff like that. Again, Clinton just using his relational capital and partnerships, which is why the strategic partnerships are so important. One of the things, too, I would say is even opportunities like this. When I found out about you guys and being the leader of strategic partnerships, one of the ways I'm always thinking is how can we multiply our marketing efforts with us being a small team. And so I think that's a lot of how people find us. I think that people find out about our other events through the hotline, so through texting 494949. Since the beginning, and I think we still have it, Google, because we are a mental health nonprofit, we've got some, and I don't understand that as a market.
The C3 or the C6, you get free keywords?
Yes, whatever that is, and you would know this, but it generates and goes, directs people to our website.
Google's
so there's
nonprofit AdWords.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, so we have that sort of thing as well. And you also asked a question about the ages. I would say that probably would skew more in the adult range, and we've actually got some specific policies and things for parental consent and things for younger. But one of the things that we've noticed, and I've heard talked around the office a lot of times, is in the schools specifically, when we're there, we really push, hey, if you ever need help, talk to this 494949 number. And we even put a little direct link. And a lot of times the chat team will see an influx of new chats based on that, and then the students will do that. So,
have you guys ever had any problems with the 4449s getting overloaded?
I know that when it comes to hiring a new soul medic or crisis specialist, the keyboard warriors, sometimes when there are a lot, our soul medics are answering and interacting with several chats at once.
Oh, okay.
So that and they've been able to handle that. But
I mean, that's great news and sad all in one.
It is, yeah. So we're always looking for really cool. They're paid positions, but they're part-time paid positions. A lot of times working remote, all working remote to be able to answer those texts and those texts in. So.
I love what you guys do.
Thank
you. It's so necessary. And I'm glad that people are coming around to this being a topic that we can actually discuss as well. And
me too.
Yeah, I bet. And speaking of which, how do you go about follow-ups or getting feedback, or how do you know that it's working?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really cool, and one of the things we've been trying to push, at least I have in the corporate wellness space, is okay. We've done the event once, and that's kind of what we've mainly been doing is we come in and we do the event once, but we have the data just sitting there from the first event. Over the course of the hour, your people have answered these questions, and so that's a lot of a launching point. And actually, it's funny you asked that today, because today was a perfect case in point for a company where they saw that, out of the 40, 50 people in the room that were answering, 9% of them said over the past 30 days they'd seriously thought about suicide. So it's launching points like that say, okay, we need to come and have a second follow-up event. And because we ask so many questions in what I call the discovery event, it allows us to come back and say, okay, We just asked a question that had all these different points that here are all the different things that could be causing you anxiety: toxic stress at work, financial problems, marriage,
Brice.
family. Yeah, Brice, exactly.
Brice,
Hyper specific problem.
It's just Brice.
Exactly. If it was anonymous, you would put that on there too. You'd be like, "This is just to clarify. This is Jonathan, and the problem is."
And the problem is Brice. Well, but when you're doing that for a corporate, do you guys charge for that?
We do, yes. And that's what's so cool about that is the entire rest of the organization is based on grants or based on fundraising. But in the corporate wellness space, we've been fortunate enough to charge for our services. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's been really good.
Boy, I really like that idea of I'd like you to come in here.
We would love to do it.
And besides that, we're going to be partnering on other things.
Heck yeah.
Are you seeing more of a willingness of companies to, have you guys come in? Is it are you starting to get more and more and more, companies that are like, hey, can you please come in? Maybe they don't have a concern, but like we'd like to know, like just because, work culture is such a big,
It's the pulse.
Yeah, and it can be overused, and it's just like we're a big happy family. Is like, how are you? Are you guys getting more and more of those corporate, people asking you to come in?
And if I could tack on to that
Please.
too, that's a great question, because I'm wondering if as your awareness goes up, that there's a direct correlation between people now know there's a resource, so I'm wondering how much of it is chicken and egg.
I think that's it. And I've really been analyzing that a lot lately over the last 6 months is, are people willing to have our services? If they are not, what is the thing that's keeping them? Yeah. And so I think you can think about a couple of things. I think you can say, people wouldn't be interested in us for a few things. One would be, is this really effective? Like, can we trust and, can
we quantify it?
Can we quantify it? And the only reason that somebody would say no with that is if they'd never seen us do our thing or they didn't have a referral. But there have been so many different companies that have said, no, we did this at our company and it worked. So, and people aren't disappointed there. So that's the other factor. The other factor is if it doesn't align with their budget, since they pay for us, they look at just the event cost when we go in and they say, man, that could be a lot for now, until they realize after the event, if they've agreed to it after the event, they say, but 4 people just admitted that they were suicidal. Like, that was worth it. Like, how do you put a price tag on that? Yeah. And also, too, if they think about it for a little bit, doing events like these and getting a pulse on your company, that could lead to retaining people. And the cost of retention is so high. So I think that's important. But honestly, I think the number one limiting factor for us getting into more businesses is not, they wouldn't be willing to pay the money, or, they wouldn't be willing to trust us. I think it's literally just awareness. And so that's where I'm excited about it, is that we're going from this is a Fort Wayne-based company. What does it look like and what does it take to scale this so that there's, marketing around, hey, this is what this is. And
what I really like about it is we've woken up as far as we've gone from a sleep culture, which we have, that people don't want to admit this, or if you admit it, it's a sign of weakness.
Correct.
And it feels like we've really turned the corner on that.
Jumping in here to shout out one of our podcast sponsors, Sweetwater. Now, just for some reference, without Sweetwater, our podcast would sound something like this. It would also look something like this. Enough of that. Sweetwater is the nation's largest destination for music gear, as well as your one-stop shop for all things podcasting. We personally worked with them to fill out the studio, and I can say from experience, they are the friendliest team to be working with. You can receive personalized gear advice as well as technical support to get your gear up and running. We honestly cannot recommend them enough. So if you're a music person, a content creator, a podcaster, etc., make sure to check them out in the description below.
As you're thinking about it, what's the dream? Like, what's the dream for you guys? What would make you say, look, we're now on top of the mountain?
Oh, yeah. I'll start with just the Wired experience, which is the corporate wellness. And I will steal Clinton's because as I saw the potential for this thing and the gold mine that this is, I said, holy cow, what happens if we scale this? And I just asked him, I said, almost exactly how you asked me, Jonathan. It's like, Clinton, what's your dream? And Clinton was like, okay, my dream, honestly, for the Wired experience is the premier service that gets the hard conversation started. And so right now it's very specifically based around, suicide prevention, anxiety, mental health. But the way that the event is structured, it's built to start the conversation anonymously and then eventually, hopefully in person, around really taboo and tough topics. And so you can think about all kinds of tough topics, politics, all kinds of things where, you're trying to break log jams. But that's kind of the more philosophical one. The literal one is that we go from being just a regional company to where we're doing corporate wellness events across the nation and even internationally. We have it's a hard balance here because, and you've seen it because you came over to the studio. It's hard though because mental health is so, you want that human personal touch. Mm-hmm. And so we have a very, very robust virtual program to where we could cast out our Wired experience, including all the polling going along with it. And we've offered that for some companies. Even there was a company who has a subsidiary out in Owensville, Missouri. And I said, was that something you'd like us to do virtually? I said, nope, we want you here in person. So doing what it would take to do that. And then I think the same thing, honestly, with pretty much just across the whole board is, what does it look like to have, we already have a national reach on our hotline because somebody in Florida can text in to the 494949. But schools, we've been pretty local as well. What does it look like to have a team that's going into schools across the nation and things like that? And that would be the big impact.
I guess that just begs the question then is, because there's got to be some tough days doing this as well.
Oh, super tough.
I would assume. What is the most rewarding thing for you doing this gig?
It's a important question, and I think one that we have to ask ourselves working for a company like this. Clinton did a really good job when he hired me, when he said, just so you're aware, and he almost said it just like, there are tough days here. Oh, yeah. It being a nonprofit, it being around suicide prevention and that kind of thing. I think probably the most rewarding things are the conversations that I have with people right after the event. So I'll tell you a story that this was an amazing story. So I was fortunate enough where we booked a business who they wanted a Wired experience at all their subsidiary companies and all of their shifts. And so I was doing a lot of this, and I was at this one in particular, and it had been like 2 or 3 I'd done that day. And I got to the point where I'm one who really wrestles with people's nonverbals. So whenever I'm doing a presentation and I look at somebody and they look like they're not into it, I'm like, oh crap. And I think through it in my head. So there's one guy who he's looking at the booklet, or I'm talking, and whatever, and I say something, and he does this number where he like rolls his eyes and like looks up, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's completely disengaged. Well, I go through the whole thing and just grin and bear it, and then at the end, he walks up to me, and I go, here we go. And he goes, hey, I just want to tell you, thank you for coming and doing what you did today. I said, oh, you're welcome. He said, my wife has been recently dealing with a major brain issue that's required surgery, and she's gone through all kinds of mental health issues and that sort of thing. And I just have been kind of at a loss for how to help. And he was asking me questions. And so then I thought back to the moment where he was doing that. And it wasn't
his realization?
It was his realization that, oh my goodness, what this guy is talking about is exactly what I'm going through right now. And I needed the space to be able to talk about this. And it was like, oh, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right there for guys like this guy right here.
Really cool.
Yeah, it was a cool story.
I think we're getting into the rapid wrap-up.
Ooh.
I think we're getting there.
Let's do it.
So Brice is he's gonna take those for you.
You lived all around the Midwest, and we get a lot of snow in this area.
Yeah.
What's your favorite winter activity?
Oh, that's true. Honestly, probably sledding. And then I would add now with kids, anything I could do with right now my daughter, and then eventually my son as well, because I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old son, and watching her play in the snow, I could do that all day.
You said Angola. That brings me to the toboggan run.
The toboggan run.
Oh, yes.
Have you done
Pokagon.
Yes.
Yes, I have. In
fact,
have
not.
Oh, you have not yet?
No.
Oh, it's epic.
Well, I'm going with you and the kids.
So let's do it. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, let's do it. Actually, that was where my reception was for our wedding. We got married at a church up there, and then Yeah, they were joking about it when we were in the reception. They're like, we should go down the toboggan run. I got married in November. It was freezing.
Yeah. It sounds better than it is.
Yeah, it sounds a lot
yeah.
better. We did not do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Your favorite aspect of Remedy Live, is it going into the schools, the chat service, or going into the corporate world? What's your favorite part?
Yeah, my favorite part is getting to have. Actually, no. My favorite part is being able to go into so many different environments. So especially in the corporate wellness space, and even my background in ministry has brought me into talking about mental health and churches and ministries. Just getting to talk to so many different people with my leader of strategic partnerships role, kind of like what we're doing right now. I love this stuff.
All right, I'm going to take it full circle. We started this podcast off by talking about AOL and the CDs. What was your AOL name, your AIM name?
Your AIM? You remember?
Wow, that's good.
Do you have any recollection of? If not,
I do, and I will tell you,
Okay.
I never had one.
Oh.
Somehow, I'm not sure how that happened, but my first social media experience I remember was Facebook.
Okay.
But somehow I never had AOL Instant Messenger. If I'm guessing right, it probably freaked my parents out. So that's why I did not do that.
Yeah, it's always funny when somebody gives me their email and it's still an AOL account. I'm
I
like,
know.
Oh.
I still have a
Wow.
Hotmail.
I still have a Hotmail
Yeah,
too.
he's right. Exactly.
So,
I think my wife has a Hotmail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to ask my wife what hers is because she remembers hers, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
She was on AIM.
Did you have a name, Jonathan?
no.
The one that you want to share?
No.
Or not share?
I don't.
Yes, I did. Those are two separate questions. Yes, I did. And
I will tell you after the show.
All right.
And then lastly, how would people go about getting a hold of you? Because I know what you guys are doing is so valuable and important. And both for the schools and for corporate America, how would people go about getting a hold of you guys?
Yeah, so first thing I would recommend is just go to our website, RemedyLIVE.com. You can pretty much navigate anywhere you need to find that. There's also an email that you can email us at, which is info@RemedyLIVE.com. And then, honestly, being in the position I'm in, I love kind of being the nexus of directing people wherever they want to go or need to go. So even just emailing me, Brandon@RemedyLIVE.com, and I would love to have a conversation about how we could partner with you.
Brandon.
Yep. Brandon. Yep.
Well, Brandon, you're a great guy. I can't thank you enough for coming.
Oh,
and anything, listen, we're going to be working with you guys regardless.
Appreciate it.
And I know what you guys are doing is making a big impact
Thank you.
in the region. And if, like I said, if we don't have a healthy stance on mental health, there's nothing left.
No.
If you're not healthy mentally, there is nothing. And that always reminds me that Pioneer starts here, and right here in Northeast Indiana.
Absolutely.
And thank you for what you guys are doing. And thank you for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget, you can find us on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and you can always find us on pioneerstartshere.com. Thanks again for joining us on behalf of the MarCom team.